Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone. And now, here is your host, the lovely, delightful, insightful, and all-around great gal, Ms. Barbara Delong.
I have to thank Ken Quiet Hawk for that wonderful intro. The last part he wrote by himself. That was not in the script that was given to him. Tonight I have Mark Snyder with me, and he's one of my favorite people. He is my go-to guy on all things Billy Meier. And as far as I'm concerned, he's an expert in the field, but that just means he knows a lot more than I do. And we're going to be talking tonight about a book. And the title of the book is The Talmud of Jmmanuel, Jesus, for those of us who are not in the know. And it may be the true testament of Jesus. This ancient document was discovered in 1963 by Billy Meier, and after having been encased in resin and buried for nearly 19 centuries. It gives you a clear English translation from the original Aramaic writings. And it answers questions like, what was the UFO connection to Jesus? Where did his father come from? Who was the real betrayer? And the secret of Jmmanuel's rising. It's an amazing book. It does uncover a lot of things that people have been kind of questioning for generations. And among other things, those who are on a spiritual journey will feel a greater sense of oneness and understanding as to all of creation. This book gives you a hint of it. There are other books that Billy has written that will take you deeply in, that you'll need hip boots for as far as the spirituality goes. And we will eventually get into that as well. But for now, welcome to the show, Mark.
Hi, Barbara. How are you?
Doing well. Doing very well.
Very glad to hear it. I'm looking forward to our little chat.
Yeah, I am too. This is a small book. It's not heavy reading, and yet you will every now and then you'll think, well, this goes right along with the Bible, and then suddenly you are caught up. It jerks you because it obviously is not the way the Bible has written it, and something that many of us have questioned over generations. Is the Bible an absolute historical, carved in stone history, or is there stuff that's been done to it that has perhaps changed the message? And I think the thing that got me the most is that recently, with all the spiritual stuff that I've been involved in, I am becoming more and more of the opinion that there was a source of all creation, and it wasn't God. God was more or less man-made and earthbound to a certain degree, and that kind of comes out in this book, which I sat back and I said, well, I'll be damned. That's exactly what I've been struggling with, cosmically speaking. That religion unto this planet is just unto this planet, and there is so much more out there to reach for, spiritually speaking.
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points here. I don't want to flood you with too much information, so I'll kind of go at the pace that you want, and you can ask questions, and I'll try to paint a little picture for you.
Okay. Well, the very first thing that is presented in the book is his lineage,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an impressive lineage. It takes you all the way back to Adam, and most people would say, okay, Adam and Eve, beginning of creation, but no, that's not the case. So, where did Adam come from?
There were two Adams, according to Billy Meyer material. There were two Atlantises, according to Meyer material, and Adam 1 was in the first Atlantis, and Adam 2 was during the second Atlantis. And that's a real brief answer to your question. I'm going to let you ask the question so you get what you want. Because, I mean, these are gigantic topics that we're just skimming over that you could do a whole show on. So
I know that's what gets me. I think that where I want to take this is to explain to people that Jesus, his parentage, I mean, he comes down to, being born of Mary and who, but no, you have to go back to Adam. You have to go back to Adam, and who.
Okay, I'll step in here.
Yeah.
This is a big, huge topic.
Yes.
And it's gonna, your listeners are gonna be drinking from a fire hose here, so I'm gonna just try to make it as easy as possible. The Meyer information talks about the spirit form. Every human being has a spirit form, and our spirit form is a fragment of the universal consciousness. And the spirit form is what survives over many, many lifetimes. So it's very interesting that you brought up the lineage of Jmmanuel, but you brought up the physical heritage, like who his parents were and who their parents was,
yeah,
et cetera, which is the way we on Earth look at it. Now, the extraterrestrial humans called the Plejaren don't look at lineages that way. They look at a spiritual lineage. So they look at previous personalities. So they look at Jmmanuel and they say his family tree is what they call the Nocodamian lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And Nocodamian goes back to 9.6 billion years ago. And he was incarnated on another world in another galaxy.
Okay, so just, we're going to forget there's an audience here, and you and I are just going to talk. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine. But
I mean,
right.
And if we lose them, they can buy the book and catch up.
Well, it's not going to, a lot of this is not in this book.
Well, then they can research themselves.
They're going to have to research the Meyer material.
Okay.
There's a whole lot of moving parts.
At one point, Jmmanuel says, "Prophet, I have come back into the world from the realm of Arahat
Athrasata.
Very
good question.
Yeah, a highly evolved group of spiritual guardians sent here by God's will so that I should teach the three human races the new the newly brought teaching of truth. Now, I'm fine with that, by the way. You know,
Do you want me to kind of fill the dots, connect the dots for you on that, so it makes a little bit more sense, or do you want to just roll with it?
Well, let me roll a little bit.
Okay.
I am absolutely of the opinion there is a universal consciousness, that the element of God is not the end all be all. He is merely in the line of hierarchies, and I've written about this on my website, decades ago. So that I'm glad that I found research that catches up with me, or I catch up with it. I don't know which one. And I am fully go along with the fact that the spirit within is what incarnates, not the soul, not the personality, not the body. It is the spirit that within us that goes generation to generation to generation. Okay, so what is this stuff about 3 human races? In one place I find 3 human races, in another place I find 10 or 7. 7. Sorry.
The origin of Earth humans is at least a whole show in itself.
Mm-hmm.
There was the civilization of Atlantis that started here 133,000 years ago. That was the second Atlantis.
Okay.
The first Atlantis was here 389,000 years ago. There was a civilization from a man named Pelagon, who was here 150,000 years ago. The first Atlantis, I believe, was 389,000 years ago, if I remember correctly. So, and then we also had an influx of people that looked Asian, that came from the other side of the galaxy, and that happened about 26,000 years ago. There was a group that came here from the Sirius system, which first settled on Mars and then settled on Malona. Malona was destroyed and Mars got thrown out of its orbit. The survivors came to the Earth, and their spirit forms, some of the other spirit forms, also came to the Earth. So there's the whole story of the origin of humanity on the Earth is just outrageously big topic that we could spend 3 shows on. So I was going to take us down a little slightly different path. I mean, we can come back to your question.
Okay.
I think it's a good question.
Okay.
But it's just so massive. That's what I'm saying. It's just, that's the challenge here. So you talked about the term God.
Yes.
Okay. And this is one thing I think it's absolutely important that we talk about this.
Absolutely.
The Maya information, and this is going to sound weird to you and probably your listeners a whole lot. This is a very bad translation that we're looking at today, and this is one of the problems with the translation. Wherever you see the word God, you should see the word Ishwish.
Okay.
Ishwish is a title, much like professor or doctor. And actually, there's literally some kind of exam I believe these extraterrestrials take before they take on that term, before they have that title. Now, what happened on the Earth is when Israel got involved, they had something called the Tetragrammaton, which is, sometimes you've probably seen it before, YHWH, the unutterable name of God.
Yeah.
Well, as part of the confusion of religion, which was done intentionally by the Giza intelligences, one of the things the Giza intelligences told the people of the Earth the leader always said he was God. He was the creator of the universe. So they created this confusion, which has lasted till today. So we have this incorrect notion that there's a heavenly Father up there. There isn't. The way we use the term God is completely fallacious. There is no God in the sense that the religions teach.
I know that's where I've come from for the last 10 years.
There is a universal consciousness
Mm-hmm.
that is not a heavenly Father, and we can explain why he's not a heavenly Father. In fact, this intelligence has no personality, although it radiates love, which is something it's hard for humans to wrap their mind around. So anyway, that's a big chunk to digest, so I don't want to keep the fire hose on straight. I'll let you.
No, it's that's been my belief system for quite a while, that there is the source of creation, but and we are a piece of it. But I explain it. It's sort of like a flower that casts out seeds. And some thrive and some don't, but it doesn't follow around all the seeds and water them and harvest them and take care of them. It casts the seeds out and then it gets on with whatever its business is. And that's how I see creation. We have a part of creation within us, and the only place that I differ from the Billy Meyer material is that as a spiritual entity, we are on a journey to accumulate wisdom and knowledge and love and light. And our journey is not to rejoin the source, but to become a source.
Right, and that is the difference.
Yeah, that's the only place where I differ from Billy Meyer's philosophy. He may come around to my way of thinking. You never know.
You better straighten him out. I say give him a call. Get him on the phone. Straighten his ass out quick.
Yeah. Send me his number. I'll call him. Right. But the material that we've got here with the Talmud. Talmud, is that the correct pronunciation?
I think that's close enough for me.
Okay, of Jmmanuel. Now, this material does differ from what is in the Bible, and it differs greatly in his frustration with not being able to get his message across to even his disciples.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, I found fascinating. It's not, and in this text that has been underground for 19 centuries, he is basically saying, it's going to be 2,000 years, and you're going to misquote me. You're going to take my teachings and you're going to skew them. You're going to make cults out of it. You're going to. I mean, he basically in this book, while you flow along and it's very close to what the Bible is saying, and then suddenly there's an explosion from him about, you're going to betray me. You're going to preach falsely. You don't understand the message I'm trying to teach. And
correct.
And it's sort of like he's so frustrated, and in the Bible he's so wishy-washy, lovey-dovey, and the only place he gets angry is in the temple when he knocks over the money changers and stuff, and yet in this book he is frustrated with even the followers because they don't understand what he's trying to teach them. He's trying to teach them the secret of creation, and they are trying, and they don't understand it.
That's true. I would agree with that statement.
Why don't they understand it? It seems so simple.
That's a good question. I mean, I think today we're even a little bit confused about it. You know what I could do? I'll just throw this out. I could trace a little bit of, you talked about Emmanuel, and I could tell you some things that I came across in my studies that I think might clear things up.
Okay, that
for
sounds
some
great.
people, so that I'll kind of spray the fire hose for just a little while and not try to do it too much. So, this was the part of the Meyer material that actually I was the very least, I would have to say can I say it that way? The very least interested in, because I think because of maybe religious influence, or I just figured that surely we know the name of the most important figure in Western society. So I kind of went out I set the Meyer material aside and started to research the name Jesus, first of all. And I found out the most astonishing thing, and I might have mentioned this on your show before. I found out that none of the ancient languages had the letter J. None of the Bible languages had the letter J. And actually, no language that I found on Earth really had the letter J until about 1550.
Yeah.
So if you look at the Greek, if you look at the Hebrew, if you look at the Aramaic, there is no letter J. For example, in the Greek, we have an alpha, and it has a corresponding letter in English, A. We have a beta, and its the corresponding is B, and a gamma, and its corresponding is G. And we have an iota, and the corresponding is I in English. Well, there was no J in Greek. Now, Greek was what the New Testament was written in. It mostly Koine Greek, but some Doric Greek and some other kinds of Greek. And I'm not really a Greek expert, but I did enough research to realize that his name originally could never have been Jesus, because none of the languages, the Aramaic, the Hebrew, the Greek, had the letter J. Now, today, the Meyer people always use the letter J before the name. If you see the name Emmanuel in the Bible, and you do see it in there, it'll always be with an E, because they had no way to translate initially the letter J. But the Lyrian had the letter J. So this was, for me, and people think differently, and I think a lot sometimes differently than other people. But this was rock solid evidence that he was never called Jesus Christ, because he could not have been Jesus Christ, because their language didn't support that. And I also got lucky enough to find a 1611 version of the King James Bible. Guess what? He's not called Jesus in the 1611 version of the King James Bible, and he was not called Jesus in a Gutenberg Bible. The Gutenberg Bible was the first mass-produced movable type Bible, and it was first printed around 1455.
So what'd they call him?
Well, in the first King James, in the first true 1611 King James, they either spelled his name IESVS or IESUS.
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, they pronounced it Jesus or Jesus. They never called him Jesus because they had no way to call him Jesus. They didn't have that. Same with John and James. They were renamed at some point. And somebody, yes, if you look in a 1611 King James, John will be IOHN. James will be IAMES. The book of Job is the book of IOB. Anyway, not only did they change the text, they changed the name of these people. And to me, was even more audacious to have the audacity to literally change the names of these people, which to me is absurd. And I come from the background of the Bible being the literal words of God.
Yeah.
So this was a huge, huge breakthrough to me. And before that time, I really kind of avoided this particular part of the Meyer material. And we can go through the Council of Nicaea and all that if you're interested. I think it's pretty interesting. But
well, it is. I mean, they even took out all of the inferences to reincarnation, which I think are very important.
Of course.
In the Council of Nicaea. I just, I look at this work and I think something that I have thought for a very long time, that the Bible, while it is a wonderful collection, that the Bible was created to give the ignorant a foundation, though they couldn't read it, but to create a religion, literally, around a philosophy to control people. And it just, I mean, and the Israelis in the Talmud are not the chosen people. They are not. I mean, they aren't the favorites at all. As a matter of fact, they're the ones that get the worst treatment. You're going to be killed. You're going to lose your country. You're going to. I mean, he speaks against the Jewish with great vehemence, which surprised me.
I think the Meyer material says that it was Emmanuel's brother Jacob and Paul that kind of changed a whole lot of this, and which kind of invented the religion of Christianity.
Well,
and I think Judas Iscariot is not the traitor in this information. He was a very loyal follower, and he's the one that was the scribe that wrote everything down. And there was a guy named Judah Iscariot, which stole the scrolls and then started to create the New Testament as we know it today. Anyway, that's what the Meyer material says. Now, just to be neutral as possible, the original scroll for the Talmud was destroyed. To me, the whole topic, and again, I think differently than other people. To me, the whole story of Emmanuel and the whole book and everything is just depressing to me, because we don't have this scroll anymore because the Mossad burned it. They destroyed it when they burnt Isa Rashid's house.
Well, yeah, and I think that's important to note that this material, when it was discovered, was so controversial that there were many attempts on, well, Billy's life and the man who actually discovered it. He and his family were all killed.
They were machine gunned to death by the Mossad. And he managed to just send what he had translated, which he had kind of translated very poorly because he didn't know these concepts that we've been talking about. So Billy then, years later, got back, and what I'm really interested in the new Emmanuel Talmud is there's a whole section, it's about 100 pages long, where Billy talks about all of this in the terms, and I think that would be very interesting. But I just haven't gotten around to it. I think subconsciously, I just avoid this because it's a subject of cognitive dissonance internally, because think about 2,000 years of wrong teaching and wrong understanding have come about because of that. It's just staggering the damage that's been done. And the man who did the translation was killed. His family was killed. The rock hard proof was burned. And then all of the romanticism about the New Testament now that exists, and people are taught to be submissive their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not taught self-responsibility. They're taught to be sheep, and that's exactly the terminology that's used. So it's just, the whole thing, I guess, is just difficult.
Well, though,
from one perspective, in my way of looking at the world.
It is, and yet, it's what I like about the title of my show, Nightlight. It provides a flicker of light in darkness. And to be honest with you, the concept of um, religion, the concept of control with religion, to me is starting to it's starting to lose. And this is all religions. This is not just one particular. People are beginning to wake up to the fact that they have all the power within them. That while there is not a nice old man with white hair sitting up there, sprinkling us with love and stuff like that, that we have within us a spirit that is so amazing and powerful and knowledgeable. And if we can just let go of all of the falsehoods that have been hammered into us since birth, and understand that we have the power, the capability, the tools, and the wisdom to reach into cosmic consciousness.
Do you think it would be a good time to talk about the Giza intelligences, or do you want to steer clear of that whole area?
No, we can do that. I'm fine. Listen. Any conversation with you is amazing. Go with it.
Okay, I'll turn the fire hose back on just a little bit. And generally, archaeologists, people like Brian Forrester, and these other people that are doing serious work on history now, they all generally agree in one thing, that about 12,500 years ago there was this great catastrophe that occurred on the Earth. And the Maya information says that there was this great war between Atlantis and Lemuria, and the Atlanteans struck first, and they basically destroyed Lemuria. They melted the city that was above the ground. There were two cities underground, Agartha Alpha and Agartha Beta. They were connected by underground tunnels. I don't know how much of that was destroyed, possibly all of it. But enough of the Lemurians survived, not many. But some of the scientists went out into our asteroid belt, and they pulled back an asteroid. They affixed electromagnetic drive to it, and also some kind of nuclear-powered drive. And they brought it back to the Earth as a missile, and they aimed it at this gigantic continent called Atlantis. And it didn't hit the Earth, but it exploded in the sky and rained down pieces of this gigantic asteroid. And it was like the Earth getting hit by hundreds of nuclear bombs. Two of the large pieces of this asteroid went like two giant fists into the Atlantic Ocean. They hit the crust of the Earth. They tilted the Earth on its axis. And that's why we have our seasons now. Before that, the Earth was amazing. It was like this incredible, it was like a garden planet everywhere. It was wonderful. But the Earth was knocked off on its axis, and it left the planet in this devastated state. The people that survived went back to the most basic form of living, and after, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 generations, they lost all their technology, they lost all their knowledge, and they were just barely surviving. It took about 700 years or so until the people got back on their feet again, and the extraterrestrials came again. And these were not benevolent extraterrestrials. These were an offshoot of the Pleiaren, and the Pleiarans call them the Giza intelligences. They can be traced all the way back to Eris the Barbarian, who was the guy that got the whole war started.
Oh, yeah.
Eris was a king of wisdom, an Ishwish. He would have that term that is incorrectly translated God. Well, if we start back, I won't go through the whole story. It's too long, but I'll take you back to 3,320 years ago. And these Giza intelligences had started this whole ruling the earth thing. And Jihave was the guy's name. He screamed for blood. He screamed for revenge. He was the god. He was a king of wisdom. And Ishwish. Now, we'll talk more about where these guys went off, because wisdom's kind of a misnomer a little bit. He was a megalomaniac like his father, Jehovah. He proclaimed himself as the creator. And he caused terrible devastation among the races here on Earth. There were 3 human races, I guess, at this time. He was addicted to his power, and he had 3 sons. Jihave had 3 sons, Erisane, Ptah, and Solomon. Erisane wanted to take over the power from his father, and he finally murdered his father. And his 2 brothers fought against him, Ptah and Solomon. They fought against him, and they drove Erisane off. But Erisane came back with 72,000 followers, and they went secretly, returned to the earth with his army. Erisane did, in the land of Egypt, into these old cubical constructions that were some 73,000 years old. This was deep in the interior of the earth, deep below the pyramids. They established themselves securely, and they converted these rooms and constructions into this center for their wicked purposes. They had a very large spacecraft they got down there. I don't know if these ships can go right into the earth or not. They may have that ability. There were smaller ships in there as well. And that's where the Giza intelligences were located. Now, Ptah and Solomon, the other sons of the murdered Jihave, they were trying to rule the earth in a fair, benevolent way for a little while. And in the 93rd year of this new rulership on the earth, Ptah got struck with some kind of disease, and he died. So his brother Solomon took over, and Salam eventually got very old, and he handed the rulership over to his son, Pleos. Now, Pleos is mentioned in the Talmud, and this was about 2,040 years ago. And Pleos wanted to go back to his home world, Era, and he wanted to reconnect with the spiritual leaders on Era. So eventually, that's what happened. Pleos left the earth, but before he did that, he told this other extraterrestrial, that we know as Gabriel now, to have intercourse with this woman, Mary. And then this spirit that they knew about this spirit named Nocodamian, and because he had incarnated on the earth as Enoch. They first knew him as Enoch, the person we call Enoch. Well, the Maya material actually says there were 3 Enochs. They didn't call him Enoch, they called him Hanok. And then there was people we call Enoch, Isaiah, Jeremiah. They had already seen this ancient spirit form come back on the earth and be a teacher. Then they knew that he would incarnate. I don't know how they knew this. That he would incarnate as Emmanuel, and he would be this great teacher. Now, if you want to really get blowing your mind, and if I can pull up this huge graph that I have here somewhere, we can talk about, Gabriel didn't leave the earth yet. He eventually died on earth and reincarnated on the earth. I think you'll get a quick kick out of this. You know who he reincarnated as?
No.
He reincarnated as what they call the one they call the feathered serpent. Who was that?
Quetzalcoatl. Yeah.
Yes, that was his next reincarnation, or one of his lineage of reincarnations. And then after that, he must have left the earth, reincarnated as Quetzal, who is one of these contacts that Billy has now. Just I thought you might find that interesting.
Well, isn't Billy, wasn't he Enoch?
He was.
Yeah, that's what I thought. He was one of the incarnations.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I know, I told you, it's very, very, very
Mark, I do pay attention.
Well, that's good. That's very, very good. Let's try to
get a gold star on that one, Barbara.
See what we got here. I don't know how much. There's a gigantic. I wish your listeners can't see this, but if you go out to the Future of Mankind site, there's a Incarnation genealogy lineage, and it's on a Nocodamian page. And I know the guy that made this. His name is Patrick McKnight, and he's quite a student of the Meyer material. And he's made just this amazing graph that shows all of the incarnations in the past of the spirit form. You see, I don't look at just Emmanuel. I just see Emmanuel as one of this family of the same. These are just prior personalities.
Oh yeah, I describe it to people, when they talk about reincarnation. It's sort of like, when you're growing up, every year you get a new winter coat because you've outgrown the previous one, and that's what that's what lives are. You gather and expand consciousness, and the next time you come back, there's greater wisdom, there's greater insight, there's greater, and you keep on evolving, so that and the earth plane has to be important. Well, it is important for a number of reasons, but one of them is spirit has to take form in order to learn and gather lessons. The physicality is very important in the gathering of information, wisdom, and expanding consciousness.
Exactly.
So that you have to have these physical lifetimes in order to really pay your dues, actually. But what I find so sad is people don't understand that. People don't understand that. I think the biggest lesson that we're here for is to gather information for the spirit within us, for it to evolve and grow. And people don't understand that. They take this lifetime as a one-shot deal, and it's not.
Well, and I think that was done intentionally, of course, by religion, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then you got to, you have information like this where it is boring, but it's probably closer to the truth than what has been put out there over the last 2,000 years. But in one place, and I went back and looked for it, and I can't find it. The material said something about only 2 of the disciples were able to read, and then Jesus, and they didn't mention the guy that was the tax collector, and you would think he'd have to be able to read to be a tax collector, wouldn't you?
Who knows? You'd think so.
Yeah, he wasn't one of the ones they said was able to read, which confused me slightly. But then
I don't know if I mentioned this. This is a good way to kind of take all the romantic kind of notions out of this time period. Just remember, these people didn't have toilets.
No. No, they didn't.
And it was worse. They didn't have toilet paper either.
No. Well, the Romans did a little bit.
They had a whole, the Romans, if you were like a very, very wealthy Roman, you may have your own little thing with something like a plumbing of something. But the average folks, oh man, no toothbrush either. Think about that.
It was rough. No deodorant.
No, yeah, never would you ever. Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of room for having a romantic notion about what that was like.
No, it was a struggle to survive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when they do the movies and stuff like that, they romanticize it incredibly.
Mm-hmm.
These people were struggling to survive day to day.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like, well, we'll take off a weekend and go to the beach. I mean, it that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody worked from the time they could walk. They were either herding sheep or gathering food or working in the fields or whatever. And in that particular part of the country, it was rougher than even other parts. There it wasn't that green. It was desert. It was rough.
So let me throw some of these incarnations at you. I'll go kind of quickly, and we can talk about them more in depth if you want. 9.6 billion years ago was Nocodamian. Henoch, the first Henoch, was about 8 billion years ago. That's Henoch with a K. There was the first Semyasa about 389,000 years ago. And then the second Semyasa, I believe, was about 14,000. That's a guesstimate.
Now, is that male or female, Semyasa? Wasn't Semyasa the father of...
Semyasa is the male.
Okay.
Yeah. Semyazi was the one of Billy's contacts.
Yes.
The woman, yes. Semyaza had the first Henoch as a son, or incarnated next as the first Henoch 13,500 years ago. And then Henoch number 2 came about 8,900 years ago. Henoch number 3 about 4,000 years ago. The person that we call Elijah, that they call Eliah, was about 780 BC, I believe. And then we had the person we call Isaiah, which would be, I think, about 690 BC. Then Jeremiah, about 580 to 662 BC to 580. Now, this is very interesting here because the spirit form steps out of the prophet, doesn't incarnate as a prophet, but incarnates as a philosopher, as Socrates, about 469 BC, and then Aristotle at about 384 BC, and then as Emmanuel, maybe I think it was 3 AD or something. There was some differences in the time periods. And the next incarnation was Muhammad at about 571 AD. Now Muhammad incarnated to stop the spread of Christianity. Remember, Emmanuel was not the origin of Christianity. Emmanuel's teachings were distorted by various people, including Paul, and the Plaiaran, or whoever, and those higher groups are up there making these decisions, decided to have Muhammad incarnate to stop the spread of Christianity, because it would have been a disaster at the very end of it. It would have kept up its momentum. Now, Muhammad's teachings have been utterly, totally distorted as well. He taught pretty much, very much like Emmanuel. And then there was a whole series of incarnations that were, again, not a prophet. Johann Georg Faust, 1480. Galileo Galilei, which is around 1564. Mozart, I believe, was around 1756. Mendelssohn was around 1809. And then our buddy Rasputin, the wild man, 1869. I don't know how much we hear about him is actually true. It's hard to say. And then Edward Albert Meyer incarnated about 1937.
Interesting that you have two musicians and their language is music.
Exactly.
And that has remained true. But
Mhm.
but where words come in, where philosophies come in, it appears that somehow the words and the thoughts um, are distorted horribly, and it just it what's the purpose of having the truth of creation out there if people aren't going to embrace it?
Right. That's a perfectly legitimate question. But the one thing that the one thing I would like to get across by going over this really wonderful graph that Patrick made is that we're talking about previous personalities in the spirit form. So I no longer look at the person that people call Jesus or Emmanuel in any of that same light that most people do. I just see him as one of the incarnations of this group that goes 9.6 billion years ago.
But he keeps talking about the truth of creation, the truth of what is the truth, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all of it, according to this, is a cult.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I believe that religions have become controlling corporate entities, that they are no longer, if ever they did, they're not teaching what the message has been from the very beginning.
I think it's even worse than that because they undermine people's ability to think for themselves. They undermine people's ability to use logic.
Well, yes, and you have to believe this in order to get to the celestial rest home when you pass away. I mean, and I have said it many times. There is no celestial rest home. There's no hell either, in my opinion. I mean, your spirit goes through a transformation, and at some point it decides to take on another life form that will be indigenous. That will be synchronistic with whatever the environment you're going to incarnate into is. But when you look at the Earth plane and you look at the Earth, it's frightening how the people here have been manipulated and lied to for thousands and thousands of years.
It's really interesting to look at the Council of Nicaea, and I know there are different takes on what's happened or what happened. There is a really interesting website. It's called Yahweh.com, and I think it's done a pretty good job of describing it. If I'll just run through this quickly. So Constantine, he set up the first Council of Nicaea. Most of the people in Rome at this time, they worshipped Apollo or Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
And other people, many of the common people, they idolized Julius Caesar or Mithras. Now, Mithras was the sun god. And David Icke has some really interesting material that he's brought out on Mithras and how that went into that whole thing went into the zodiac, and the story of Samson is very interesting. But it was illegal to be Christian at this time until Constantine, right around 1313, made the Edict of Milan. A lot of people were still worship Julius Caesar. They called him the universal savior.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things. Now, what Constantine wanted to do in this 325 AD, this meeting, he took all the leaders of all these different groups and he brought them together, and they had this meeting, and it was this tremendous, it was a fight. That's all we can say. It was a heated debate, and the people could never agree on what to call the person. They were trying to come up with a name because they all disagreed on what his name was, if you can imagine that. It took, they had 53 different names, or quote unquote, 53 different gods that they wanted to give Christianity. They still didn't know his name. This amazing story. So eventually, what Constantine did is he just put a stake in the ground and says, we're going to call the new God Jesus Krishna, which is very similar to Jesus Christ, Jesus Krishna. And they said, we are going, what he did is there was a druid god named Jesus, which is kind of, was for the people that were in Europe and the British factions. And he joined them with the Eastern savior god, Krishna. In the Sanskrit, they had the name Krishna. So they wanted, what the Council of Nicaea wanted to do, what Constantine wanted to do, was to grab the interests of these two groups and bring together this name, Jesus Krishna. So anyway, that's one point of view which I've kind of found very, very interesting. I think initially after the Council of Nicaea, they probably called him Jesus Krishna. Now, after time went on, I believe they wanted to unite the concepts in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they had the name Yeshua in the Hebrew, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they did a transliteration. You know how I was talking about alpha is equal to A, beta is equal to gamma? Well, that's kind of what they do in a transliteration. So they took Yeshua and they translated it, or transliterated, not translated, it's a different concept. Transliterated it into Iesus, which I talked about earlier, and then eventually they did a slight transliteration into Latin, and eventually the name Jesus didn't come into the English. The letter J was invented about 1550, and then eventually sometime around 1600, I think it was in 1679, is when the first Bible came out with the name Jesus in it. So the name Jesus is very, very new. And like I said earlier, in the 1611 version of the King James, he was called IESVS. And eventually, the name Jesus became popular once Gian Giorgio Trissino, who was an Italian scholar, invented the letter J. He started substituting the letter J in for the I or the Y. Now, if you study art history, in the pictures of the paintings of Christ, a lot of times on the very top of the crucifix, you'll see the acronym INRI, and that translates into the Latin IESVS, which you would pronounce Jesus or Iesus, and then the next word for the N is Nazarenus Rex Iadorium. So again, the Latin uses the I instead of the J, and the V, in this case, instead of the U. So it's very interesting how confused and blind we became, because we were, for hundreds of years, calling him still, we're calling him Jesus, and we even have the paintings, INRI, with the letter I right there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But, I think, come on, all these paintings, he never sat for a portrait.
Exactly. Exactly. But at least they were much closer to his name. At least there's proof that it wasn't Jesus.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? It's hard proof. It's undeniable proof. In my opinion, it's uncontrovertible. So I, had my own religious perspective, or so to speak, that I was real interested in the Maya material, all except this Emmanuel stuff. This is over the top. This can't be true, right? That's what I thought. Seriously, that's what I thought. I'll be honest. And I didn't want to even go there because I really liked the Maya material. I didn't want to discredit it. And I went and studied, and I said, my goodness. It was like getting hit by a 2x4. I was astounded.
Well, it's interesting. Does Billy still get communications, or has that stopped?
He has contacts. He has physical contacts. He doesn't get much telepathic. Only telepathic stuff he usually gets is before physical contact. Now, they do not. At one time, they would literally enter into the Semyase Silver Star Center there in Hinterschmidruti, but they don't do that anymore. And have you heard the whole story with what happened with Semyase, right?
She died.
Well, she didn't die, but she came very close to dying.
Yeah. Well, yeah. She was touched, I think. Is that what it was?
No, Billy and her were talking in a room, as they did sometimes. I guess she had transported down or whatever. And Jacobus, who's still one of the people there, walked in on them, and she fell and hit her head, and eventually was beamed back to her ship. I think she had barely enough consciousness left to beam herself back to the ship, and then she lost consciousness again. And eventually, she was taken back to Era, and then had to be eventually then taken from Era to the Tao universe. There's a group of extraterrestrials there that are, I guess, more advanced than the Plejaren, and they helped with starting to restore this whole process. It'll take about 70 years for her to get over the brain damage that occurred.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's ended those contacts. That occurred right around 76, 77. I'd have to look it up in my notes.
Haven't the all the alien races left the planet, and they left in the 90s, or they left?
According to the Maya material, they left, except for craft which appear around the Earth at times, observing. They left. All of them left around 1995. There are some discs, they call them telemeter discs, that are in various places around the planet. Michael Horn has a very, very interesting story to tell about one of these telemeter discs. When I think he was in Brazil for whatever reason, and he had one of these telemeter discs come right down. He was standing on a balcony, and it came right down, almost close enough for him to touch.
Aren't they sort of like drones?
Yeah, they're like drones, yeah. And they're just here observing us. But there were about 2,800 extraterrestrials on the Earth until about 1995. They had bases in Switzerland, bases in North America, and bases in Asia. They were from the Plejaren system, the Lyrian system, nearby star systems. But in 1995, something that happened, which they haven't told us yet what it is, caused them all to leave. And yeah, that's where we are now. They do talk about ships observing us. A friend of mine, Daniel Cooper, when he was in Switzerland, took some pictures of this multicolored ship that was observing. It was there in Switzerland, and I think the race of these people are called the Druin, D-R-U, I forget how they're spelled exactly. And he's got a whole series of pictures, of really amazing pictures that he took, and Billy talked about who these people were. But as far as contacts, as far as landing on the Earth and things like that, they don't come here anymore. Now, I can only speculate. Some of this may be due to some of the Star Wars stuff we have up there. I don't know. might be related to Fukushima. They knew that Fukushima was definitely going to happen. I'm just speculating. I really don't know.
It feels to me as though they're getting out of the way for us to either destroy ourselves or come to our senses, because it does feel as though since that time frame, things have escalated all over the place, and I really think that as a species, it's make or break. Now, I'm not saying that the mothership is going to come and collect us all or anything like that, but it does feel as though we have been left to ourselves to either work it out or not. And we could be at one of those mass destruction moments in time where we could be blowing each other up and starting from scratch again.
Yeah, that's so true. One of these recent articles from the FIGU group, one of their bulletins talked about 2020 and some more additional breakdown. I'd have to look. It's somewhere in my notes here. I got a whole website with this stuff on it. But around 2020 is the next major event that has to do with the breakup of our government. They've talked about 2 civil wars in the United States, in the division of the United States into 5 different areas, and all of that. I'm still holding out that we can maybe thwart some of this from happening. And to me, my main focus really is on Billy's 3 books, The Might of Thoughts, The Way to Live, and The Psyche. And these books are so fascinating and so important, and I'm really trying to master. I seem to be led to The Might of Thoughts, and that's what I keep going over and over and over.
That's an incredible book. And it's one that you can't read through. You have to read and think and read and think and read and think. And
yeah.
I do want to make sure that people know that your website is www.exopoliticsohio.us.
Yes, very good. I'm impressed. And you can listen to me on Blog Talk. Just Google Ohio Exopolitics. We're on Blog Talk now. We're on Player FM. We're on TuneIn.com. There's a whole website. And YouTube, my buddy has put up. That's putting everything on YouTube. And there's another place called Podbean where you can get Ohio Exopolitics.
Okay. I'm going to have to pause, talk a little bit.
I can talk a lot a bit. One of the things that the Meyer information talks about are creational natural laws. And one of these creational natural laws is the law of harmony. And there's a bipolar structure to everything that exists, the positive and the negative. Well, one of the things that we have to do, or we're called to do, is to maintain harmony in our thinking. And one of the ways that we do this is to constantly look inward. See, the spirit form, one of the things that Semyase told Billy is your spirit form will tell you if your thinking is right or wrong if you learn to pay attention to it. And what I can usually tell is that when my thinking goes wrong, there'll be a feeling associated with that. Now, Billy explains that the feelings come out of the thoughts. And feelings are different than emotions. Emotions are very primitive. They kind of rage upward like anger or other emotions like fear. But feelings grow. So you can have perfectly legitimate feelings for another person or a plant or an animal, and they grow from your thoughts. That's always good. You should never interrupt the natural growth of your feelings. Well, what comes after the feelings are your habits. So good thoughts lead to good feelings lead to good habits, and good habits result in good circumstances in your life.
Wow, that was something, I I kind of got caught up with feelings and emotions, and that they felt almost similar.
Well, the emotions are very dangerous. Let me explain a little bit about emotions. Billy, later on in the book here, talks about how does that verse go? He says, tangled ideas cause the thoughts to go from one extreme to another and trigger emotions, which can lead to manslaughter and murder. And this is a very, very, very interesting passage. He says, tangled ideas, I-D-E-A-S, and an idea without the L are unripe, things that aren't completely developed. It's something you haven't thought through completely. So these tangle together, they interlock, they get twisted. These tangled ideas, what they do is confuse the thoughts. Now, a tangled idea that confuses your thoughts is a very, very, very dangerous thing that can eventually lead to murder and manslaughter. So these are misdirected thoughts which trigger emotions. And this is exactly, I'll read it to you verbatim. This is a contrast to when tangled ideas confuse the thoughts and abruptly go from one extreme to another, whereby a misdirection of the thoughts arises, which triggers emotions and can even lead to murder and manslaughter. Now, misdirected thoughts trigger emotions. Now, the German word for trigger there is auslösen, which means to cause, to provoke, to elicit, to unleash. And what has happened here on the earth is when we trigger these emotions, it causes the release of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter.
Mm-hmm.
And people become addicted to this dopamine release. And that's one of the reasons why we have such violent sports. Look at the rise of the Ultimate Fighting Championships.
Oh, yeah.
Professional football. So this dopamine, we become addicted to it. So this is very, very important stuff, and I feel like I need to back up slightly here because I talked about the word. Now we're getting into the might of thoughts.
Yeah.
By the way,
that's okay.
Yeah, which is just kind of where I spend my time. We talked about ideas, incompletely developed factors, which must be thoroughly contemplated and worked through in order to recognize and correspondingly handle the values and the unvalues in them. So, our ideas, not with an L, I-D-E-A-S, are incomplete, and they have what's called values and unvalues. Unvalues is kind of a Meyer terminology. Some unvalues. Let me talk about unvalues. We're told to recognize the values and unvalues in our ideas. So we have to eventually think through our ideas enough to get rid of the unvalues. Let me give some ideas of what unvalues are. And these unvalues can require months or years to change. Unvalues are related to our character pattern, okay, and they can be psychopathic in nature. That's why I talked about the Giza intelligences, and they were crazy. And our world is going insane. Well, these unvalues are psychopathic in nature. They're related to our character pattern. I'll give you some examples of unvalues. These are unvalues that are often characteristic of psychopaths. Pathological angriness, the inability to have deep values, deep feelings for others, a lack of rational conduct, a frequent change of sexual partner. Here's one that'll shock you. Boredom.
Oh.
Boredom. Manipulative behavior. You know, you've seen people about that.
Oh, yeah.
People that become really obsessed with a sense of unfairness. This is unfair, that's unfair. Social justice warriors. If you endorse torture, that's another example of an unvalue. If your mentality is filled with hate, if you have no remorse, if you have no empathy. So these are just 13 of the 70 characteristics of psychopaths. It's in Figure Bulletin 68. So if you look at all 70 of those and you have 18 of them, you are getting to the point where you're close to becoming a psychopath. So anyway, this book is just incredible. So let me go back to the very beginnings, because we've jumped in the middle of certain things here. When you, and Barbara, I don't know, you can tell your story, I'll tell my story. There are times when you start to feel down, you start to feel negative, you start to feel somewhat depressed. Well, that's not neutral positive. So you have to unravel. You have to change your thoughts. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's a whole series of characteristics of neutral positive thoughts. So what you want to tell yourself in the present tense, you want to say, I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic, I'm satisfied, I persevere, I persist, I endure, I am the master of my own destiny, I'm the creator of my own good luck. I do not allow my thoughts to drift. I steer my thoughts. My consciousness is like a garden, like a flourishing garden, full of healthy plants. If I have a negative thought, I pluck it out like a weed. I am the master of my own destiny. It is the nature of thoughts that by their might alone, every conceivable thing can be brought to fruition. So these are just some of the things that you can use in this book to start changing your thinking. And I'll ask you this, see if this has ever happened to you. It's happened to me many times. I'm so much better now than I used to be. You can have a negative thought, and negative thoughts propagate like weeds, and they grow through your whole consciousness, and they will rotate and repeat, and it gets so you can't think of anything else other than what your current negative thought is. And it literally can drive people crazy. So you have to learn these techniques, like telling yourself, just tell yourself you're confident. Most problems, many of people's problems, stem down to lack of confidence when you get right down to it. Another thing that Billy talks about is thinking about a very positive experience that you recently had, or I just had one that was really, really nice. Sunday, when it was so sunny outside, I laid down on the grass for a little while because I knew my cats were hiding in the bushes. And they all came out of the bushes, okay. And they were jumping on top of me. And
How many do you have now, out of curiosity?
Six.
I remember you typing that you had taken in a stray, and then suddenly, voila, you were a cat person.
happened very quick. But it was so nice, just the sunshine. And there's one little guy who I call Oreo. He has a black and white tuxedo. You just have to see him. He has these sparkling green eyes. He's a great cat. They're all great. So those are neutral experiences. They're neutral positive. And it's like a little moment of gladness. Now you need to hold on to those because you need to pull those out when you start rotating the negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. And the problem is when you rotate the negative thoughts, typically there's no room for rationality and virtue in these tangled, irrational, basically wrong, ideational thoughts. You get irrationality and virtuousness, and the emotion comes, and that's where we go downhill from there. So anyway, that's what this book's about.
Well, when my mother was very ill, and she was depressed, and the doctor wanted to give her an antidepressant, and I said, no, I think I'll try something else instead. He said, oh, homeopathic? And I said, no, not really, but sort of. Mm-hmm. And I went out and I got 3 kittens.
Oh, that's great.
There is no way you can be depressed when you're living with 3 kittens.
That's a trip. That's a great idea.
And it was great, except a couple of years later, she went through another one of those, and so I got another couple of kittens. So I ended up with 12 cats at one time. So, but my mother was not depressed.
That's good.
Yeah, no, it was great. There is, yeah, I've been very fortunate. That philosophy is, not with those words, but that's been my philosophy for the last 20, 30 years, that I have a joyous life and a joyous pathway. And when things get slow and it looks like there's nothing going on, I create something so that, the element of being a creator chases everything out of the way.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very, very interesting.
I mean, it when you become a creator, there is no way that sadness, depression can be there, because you are immersed in the element of creation.
Well, that's good that you have initiative then.
Well, I would imagine with your music, same thing.
Yeah, as long as I have initiative. Sometimes the initiative goes away when my thoughts are not healthy, and it's good that you have the initiative. You're doing very well. Keep it up.
But the Meyer material, I mean, I have to admit, when first we started talking about it, I was very much in the I doubt it stage, and then we did the Who Were the Atlanteans, which was a great show, and then we did a couple of shows on his prophecies, just sort of tagging things that he has hit head on all throughout 20, 30 years, that you have to take him seriously. I mean, his life story is phenomenal. There's no way anybody with his lack of education could write the things that he is writing on his own.
I'm telling you, when you read his material, that to me is the most it's just a slam dunk. I mean, you can open any of these books almost to any place. He has a great book. It's called The Way to Live, Die Art zu Leben in the German, and there's this wonderful, I think it's on page 102, and he talks about one of the other creational natural laws. And one way to tell if you're starting to feel a little negative or a little unbalanced, one of the things that your circumstances may require you to do is to strive. There's a creational natural law called striving, and it says, let me read just about a paragraph here, and then we can talk about it. Striving creates the life right up to the being. Striving means delectation. Delectation is like enjoyment in a form which is always fulfilling and progressive. And this is what you were just saying. Get up and create something, right? That's striving. To be without striving means unwillingness and affliction. Affliction is inhibited striving and inhibited life, but inhibited striving and inhibited life bring evolution. Inhibited evolution, sorry. So if you have inhibited striving, you will have an inhibited life, and it will bring in inhibited evolution, stagnation, hopelessness, grief, confusion, irrationality, joylessness, cognitionless, unpeace, disharmony, lovelessness, resentment, lies, self-deceit, and reluctance for life. If you ever get a little feeling where you're starting to get reluctance for life, is another thing to check in. Delectation, harmony, and happiness, as well as everything positive, as well as grief and everything negative, are in the end only the revelation of how pronounced the striving is in any life form. And really, that kind of goes along with what you were just saying. To create something, you're just striving. I don't know what you're creating when you're creating something, but
well, it's funny. I have found that when life feels like it's standing still, I know it's time to find another form of creation to get immersed into. And lately, I had to redo my website, and I had such a lovely time recreating it. And the gal who's my webmaster kept saying, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. And I would say, is it against the law? And she would say no. And I would say, is it possible? And she would say yes. And I said, then do it. And so we came out with something that I'm really pleased with. I don't really care if anybody else likes it. I love it. And it's kind of like, for years, I did 20 years of painting mandalas for people. And that was a creative process that was just phenomenal. And every now and then I find something to get, I call it addicted to it, because I lose track of time. And when you lose track of time, then you're in alpha theta, which is the best place in the world to be. So, and for some people, when they're going through depressions and things like that, listening to some of this solfeggio music is a good idea.
Oh, yes. There's even a device now you can buy that will help to block electromagnetic waves. I had someone send me one, the lady that kind of leads the study in Colorado about the Meyer material, orders these from Austria, because we're bombarded with electromagnetic waves, and they're coming out with this whole 5G thing, which is going to bombard us even more. So I just thought I would throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many tools out there to use, and when I discover one of the tools, you can be pretty sure that it's not leading edge. It's just about to become an antique. But the solfeggio music has been around for centuries, and it's similar
to Gregorian chants at all?
Well, some of them were in that. What they do is you listen to the music. It's tonal music, and you listen with a headset on because it's different for each ear. And what it does is it puts your brain into alpha theta, which is the state in which you are able to really make a connection to your higher consciousness with greater ease. It's like floating in ambiotic fluid.
That's
and
great.
It is, it is music, but it's a tone. It's a tonal, and it is musical, but it doesn't, it's no beat. You're not tapping your feet or anything.
Right.
But you float in the music, and by being in alpha theta, which is where you want to be if you are going to intuitively, spiritually seek that connection with the spirit within. It enables you to do that. It is just magical. If you have Amazon Prime, you can listen to Ted Winslow's music on it. There are different frequencies, and I wasn't familiar with the frequency material. But different frequencies take you to different places, and there are, I think, 7 of them. and some deal with intuition, some deal with spirituality, and our brain is I forget what hertz our brain is on normally, but it's probably a very low hertz, and these are higher vibrational energies that take your brain to that place, so that you can work on yourself in a more spiritual realm.
And you can actually go out on YouTube and look some of his stuff up and listen to it right there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it's just amazing, because what it does is it takes you out of the rhythm of the day and puts you into a different rhythm, so that you are able to really focus more clearly and work more clearly. I play that music all the time when I'm working on, writing stuff or creating something.
Well, don't you think so much of the music today, there's a ton of good music out there like this, but you have to go find it, because what's in the public is the stuff that just makes you want to scream and run around, paint yourself blue, and be a crazy person.
Well, the music that I resonate to, is really music that was out there before I was born.
Sure.
So,
sure. Right.
So it's kind of nice to have something that I can, tune into and utilize, to help me, dig deeper and go further. It really is amazing. And another thing with the spiritual material you're talking about, when you can get immersed in it, among other things, it gives you more energy, and you live longer.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're taking yourself out of a rhythm that is not healthy and putting yourself into a rhythm that is healthy, and it energizes, it stretches you, you grow, and when you're growing and learning, the spirit keeps going.
Indeed. There's a German term, Lebenskraft, which is life force. And one of the passages in the Might of Thoughts says, therefore it is necessary to search for the power of the life force and to develop the power in order to have a reliable life potential on which one can depend, and therefore in which one can completely trust. So yeah, I would say you listening to that music that you found, which I'm going to listen to as well, Ted Winslow's Solfeggio, would be one of the things that would develop your Lebenskraft or your life power, because it, that good music like that, it almost forces you to think in a healthy way.
Oh, absolutely. And what's cool is, and I can only speak with Ted Winslow, because I did a show with him, but he uses,
he did.
Yeah, he uses
I'd like
singing.
to talk to him.
I'll send you his information. He uses singing bowls.
Really? I love those. Yeah.
He uses binaural sounds. He uses all sorts of different modalities, and it's beautiful, beautiful harmonic.
Have you heard the latest kind of? There's this music, I think they call it grunge or something. When I go lift weights in the gym, it's like sounds like someone running a jackhammer and someone being murdered, and there's just all the screaming and violence. It's horrible.
No.
You haven't heard that yet. It's good. You haven't.
What's interesting though is I've got two casinos that are right by me. I'm in Connecticut.
Oh my.
And I went and I visited both of them with my sister and brother-in-law a couple of years ago.
Oh,
and I kept saying to them, "Do you hear the sound that's being played?" And they said no. And I just said, "But there's a harmonic, there's a tonal, something going on constantly." They couldn't hear it. And I think what it was utilizing this solfeggio type of frequency to lull people into almost
sleep.
Kind of, almost, just to get them almost hypnotized with what they were doing, so they wouldn't move forward. Now, the solfeggio music really, it's Soulfiggio, solfeggio, and it was first used in the Gregorian chanting.
Yeah.
But they have identified certain different frequencies that can be utilized for healing, for intuition, for spiritual, and there are certain frequencies that can be utilized for those different things. And it's amazing. The album that I listen to the most is his Sovereignty one, which is the highest frequency I think that he does. It just sounds good to me and I like it. But it's not something that has a beginning and has an end. It's just it's there, and it's just amazing. I'll send you his information because his stuff is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, it sounds great. Thanks for sharing that. That sounds very healthy. A lot of times I'll listen to the Gregorian chants, particularly like if I'm just wanting to mellow out a lot. It sounds very similar. The music sounds very similar, I think.
It's definitely a mellow out type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes I use it because if I'm doing something that I'm charged up about and I'm really excited about, and I just I stop, I have to sort of come down off the ceiling in order to be able to go to sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
And this music does that for me. It actually, I think they had a study of some sort that if you listen to 6 to 15 minutes of it, it's the equivalent of meditating for half an hour to an hour.
Wow.
So it puts your brain in that place. Now, depending on what you want to do with it, they say absolutely don't listen to it while you're driving the car. Because that could be dangerous.
Sure.
But
see that.
But it also reminds me a little bit about, I don't know if you remember it, super learning. They had super learning that had to do with certain music, and Vivaldi's Four Seasons was that it was called super learning. They found that when you listen to stuff that had that same, I think it had to be frequency, that you were able to learn faster and retain material more. And I found I taught special education for 25 years, and I would have that music playing quietly in the background in my classroom, and I had primarily Down syndrome children. I found that their ability to retain and to utilize information had to be 50% greater when the music was on than when the music was not on.
Wow.
So and super learning is a very, it's an antique as well, but it worked, and I don't know why people aren't utilizing it. It's the same thing with the dowsing and the geospirals that, if you build over a geospiral, there's healing will take place, and they don't build hospitals and things like that over them. And you kind of wonder why. There's all sorts of wonderful material.
They don't want to heal people, because if they do that, then they won't make as much money.
Yeah, then Big Pharma's out of business, right?
It's true. It's terribly true. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. It is very sad. But while this may not be the best book of Billy's to read, it's a good one to read, and I, from what Mark said, the newer edition of it is probably better than the edition that I have read.
Well, I tell you one thing, and this is very interesting. From what I understand from my material and what other people have said, this is the book that reaches most people.
Well, I can understand why, because we've all been schooled in certain things, and I mean, like I said, it goes along with the Bible to a degree, but it gives you a different take on it. And certainly the thing that I got out of it the most was his frustration with the disciples not understanding what he was trying to teach them. I mean, he literally said, you're all going to, take my teachings and you're going to warp them and you're going to teach them falsely. And that's exactly what happened with and even Peter in the Talmud of Jmmanuel, he basically says, I won't build my church on you. And in the Bible, it says, "Thou art Peter, and upon you will I build my church."
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I am fairly certain, positive, sure that this individual, this man who was a great spirit, had no intention of creating a church.
Oh yeah. He would have nothing to do with Christianity if he was here. Well,
or Judaism, or
in that sense, you could kind of argue that he kind of is here.
but the thing is, his message transcends occult religion. It transcends it all. It's if this is the way you live, you don't need anything else. And I don't think, while his message, you wonder, I mean, is Billy the last incarnation for this spirit, or will Billy come back again?
That's a good question. I think I may have read somewhere that there is going to be another incarnation, but I think these were the 7 major prophets. I don't think there will be any more as a prophets like this.
Well, I don't think that even, while I would agree with you that Billy is a prophet, I would say that it doesn't feel to me as though, he really takes on that guise.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't walk around like he is a prophet. He seems to be a very humble man.
We've only got about 15, 20 minutes left, right?
Right.
There is probably something I'd like to cover in maybe in 10 or 15 minutes, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
One thing I would like to differentiate, I would like to explain what a spirit form is. The spirit form resides in the center of your middle brain in an area called the superior colliculus. It's the area that controls sight and all the senses. The spirit form is also called a tailstock in the Maya material. It's kind of like a fragment of the universal consciousness. 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg, the spirit form enters in the body of a child, and it sends its energy throughout the whole body like a lattice structure, causes the heart to beat. It brings in 3 minds, you could say, 3 different kinds of consciousness: your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind, and your conscious mind. And it brings in a new personality. Now, in the subconscious are programmed all of the essences of what you've learned in your previous lives. All your consciousness forms, like your confidence and your cheerfulness and your logic and your sense of fairness and your sense of duty and your sense of responsibility, and all these evolutive values are stored in your subconscious. So when the spirit form comes in, the spiritual consciousness is at the level it left off and all the evolution of all of those previous personalities. Mm-hmm. Now, the spirit form on the earth is typically about 4.5 million years old. Now, if you were one of the people that came here during the time of Atlantis or the time of Pelagon or in these other civilizations, and you came here on a ship, your spirit form could be as old as 8 million years or as old as 12 million years. Now, you have what's called the psyche. The psyche controls the thoughts and the feelings of the material consciousness. So when the child comes in, its material consciousness is It has no age whatsoever. It has no experience whatsoever. So that's why a child has to learn. And it doesn't know how to control its emotions. It doesn't know how to speak. It doesn't know how to walk or anything. But it has this spirit form in it. And this spirit form is going to send it what's called impulses or creational impulses. And these are kind of intuitive hunches that are going to guide it continually. So it's much easier for the material consciousness to evolve quickly back up if the spirit form has more experience. So if the spirit form is new, really new, it's going to make it much more difficult for that material consciousness to evolve. So we also have in our spiritual consciousness something called the Gemut, which controls the thoughts and the feelings of the spiritual consciousness. Now, the spiritual consciousness has thoughts and feelings to a degree, but not like a material consciousness does. The spirit form is mostly focused on recording everything that you do, everything that you think, everything that all the impulsations. You have a number of impulsations that occur when you're alive. It's recording everything, and it's going to take the entire record of your life into the spirit realm. And that's what happens when you physically die. The spirit form, it leaves the body and it goes into the spirit realm, which is an area around the planet that you die on. So you go into the spirit realm, and there is a storage bank in the other world where the spirit goes through this process of taking everything that you've learned and creating these essences of all of these different characteristics of all the consciousness forms. And your spirit form is absorbing all of these. So all your knowledge, all of your sense of logic, your sense of fairness, it's absorbing. So with each lifetime, the spirit form gets stronger and a little smarter. The spirit form cannot operate the same way your material consciousness does in our current lifetime. We here on the earth are in what's called rational life. There are 7 evolutionary stages that all human races go through, and there are many humans in our galaxy, about 2.6 million civilizations in our galaxy, and they're all human. Humans didn't originate on the earth, and all humans go through these 7 evolutionary steps. Now, here on earth, we have most people are in what's considered stage 2, which is rational life. But we also have civilizations, small civilizations in isolated areas, which are in what's called primitive life. And some of these would be like people in the rainforests, in the middle of certain areas in the Brazilian rainforest where they're completely isolated. Certain people on Pacific Islands, which are very, very isolated. And one of the things that we've learned, and we've even learned this even though we're only in stage 2, which is rational life, is that whenever a higher civilization comes in contact in a public way with a lower civilization, it usually causes great problems in the more primitive civilization. I'll give you an example of the people that live on the islands and north of Australia and some of those Pacific islands. When we landed on those islands in World War II, there were cargo cults that were created where the people started to worship the soldiers. They started, and they wait to this day, 80 some years after World War II. These poor people wait for a guy named John Frum to return, which I guess was one of the GIs that happened to be there that gave him certain trinkets or whatever. So these people, their consciousness has been harmed by this interaction. So these advanced benevolent extraterrestrials are very intelligent about how they come into contact with societies, and they limit it very, very much. So I just wanted to say that we spend 40 to 60 million years, and I know I'm about out of time, 40 to 60 million years reincarnating in these first 5 stages. The first is primitive, the second is rational life, the third stage is intelligent life. We're just starting to move into that stage in the world today. The fourth stage is really interesting. It's called real life. And in real life, we learn to travel from star to star with almost no time passing. And we become incredible genetic engineers. For example, Semyase's ship, Semyase was Billy's third contact, had a centralized computer that was biological. It was created by the Plejaren, and it was sentient. It could contact Semyase telepathically. She had conversations with the ship because it was essentially a living being with a metallic hull. Now, this is so strange. People can't wrap their mind around it, but this is, in fact, the case. Now, the fourth stage is what we just discovered, we just talked about, which is real life. The fifth stage is life and creational wisdom, and this is where those people start to become Ishwishes, or kings of wisdom, or as they're erroneously called, gods, sometimes in the Talmud of Jmmanuel. Mm-hmm. And at this stage, people can do incredible things with just their minds. They can do telekinesis, move things with their minds. They can do telepathy, communicate over vast distances with their minds. They can do crazy things like teleport. Semyase burn photographs with their mind. These are what's called the Ishwishes. We won't have time today to talk about this, but there was a whole group of these Ishwishes in Lyra Vega, and they hadn't focused on the spiritual material enough, and they became incredible tyrants. And they destroyed entire planets, sometimes solar systems. They conquered entire worlds. And one of the Nocadamian spirit form did not come back first to straighten out Earth. He came back first to straighten out Lyra Vega, which was in many ways a whole lot worse, because we had interplanetary war at this time. So that's what he came back for, to stop. So that's called the fifth stage, life and creational wisdom. And if you don't emphasize the spiritual teachings and you get unbalanced and you get into the fourth and fifth stage, that's where the quote-unquote Star Wars occur, where people destroy planets and even solar systems. And you can regress back. A civilization can regress way back to primitive stages when they destroy themselves. And can you imagine how difficult it is for an advanced spirit form to have to live again in these more primitive stages? But anyway, in the sixth stage, and I know I'm about out of time completely, during this time the spirit form evolves into a half spirit level, kind of a wavering half spirit, half material level. We spend about 56 million years in that state. And then we go into the seventh level, and we go through these 7 spiritual levels. And Barbara, you mentioned Arhat Athrasata, which is the beginning level. Mm-hmm. We spend 364 million years in these 7 levels. And then we go through this very long process of merging with creation. After we get through these 7 levels, we merge with creation. It takes about 2.5 billion years. So that is a quick overview of the spirit form and reincarnation and the stages of human evolution. That's like drinking from a fire hose. I try not to do that too much tonight, but
no, I think you gave a great deal of information. I don't think it was overwhelming, but a lot of it was familiar to me, so that's why it wasn't overwhelming. Kind of when you were talking about incarnations and babies, my theory is that a spirit comes through with all the wisdom of the cosmos, but is frustrated because it isn't able to manipulate the physicality, so that a lot of times when babies cry and scream and they're not hungry or wet, it's out of frustration because they want to say something and they can't get it out.
Sure. They can't. Yeah, that you got a spirit form in there that's extremely evolved and a material consciousness that doesn't know English yet or German or wherever it happens to be born.
Well, yeah, and then when you get the learning process, then you get teachers and parents and the environment and religion and all of these other parts of society pouring information into that spirit, and the spirit consciousness gets shoved way, way back because it's absorbing all this other stuff. And it isn't until people are in their 30s or 40s that they start searching for that spirit part of themselves again.
That's good. Interesting. Very, very interesting.
Well, it's not Billy Meyer, but,
No,
it's Barbara Delong.
There you go.
So what do you have coming up? Because we got about 3 minutes left here.
I don't plan things very much. I really don't. I exist on a day-to-day basis. I really don't have any. I don't have any guests lined up. I don't have anything lined up. That's maybe part of the problem. But
no, I think that I love the Billy Meyer information. I don't always 100% agree with him, but I have to admit that he's an amazing man, and that his knowledge and wisdom, just go beyond what could possibly be there in a normal person. So I certainly honor whatever he puts out there. I don't agree with him that it's going to be 800 years before we come to total peace on the planet, but I'll have to we'll have to both reincarnate and figure it out when we get there. We'll probably still be doing blog talk.
Yeah. You're right.
I hope Blog Talk never goes away. But I want to thank you so much. I so appreciate your sharing your wisdom with me and those that are listening, because it's amazing material. And if you go to his website, which is www.exopoliticsohio.us, you'll find he has tons and tons of his podcasts there. And the new website looks fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, I was working on mine just like you were. That's interesting.
Yeah, no, it was facelift time.
Yeah.
And all I could think of was, I don't want to do this again.
Exactly.
Now it's perfect. Yeah, in another 4 or 5 years it won't be, and I'll find other ways of traumatizing everybody. But thanks again, Mark, for being here. I so appreciate your taking your time to help us figure all of this amazing stuff out.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
You too now. Bye-bye.
To promote my new flower shop, I had one place print my business cards, another print my brochures, and a third, my signs. Now my roses aren't red, my violets aren't blue, my geraniums look dead, and I don't know what to do.
Staples can help your business stand out with signs, banners, and brochures that are a true reflection of your company. And now at Staples, spend $50 or more on print and marketing services and get $5 off your next in-store purchase.
Now my business is blossoming, and I'm spending less green.
Exclusions apply. In-store only. Ends 6/23/18.